Hello, everybody. Hopefully you've went into that discussion. You've answered your questions about um, our discussion of water and its important properties. And now we are going to finish off chapter 2, our chemistry chapter. And after that, we're going to move into some more um, biology topics. We do have a little bit of physics in between chemistry and biology, but I promise we're working our way there. So we finished last time talking about carbohydrates, right? Molecules that are formed by carbon and hydrogen and oxygen. And now we're just going to talk about the other macromolecules that are important for organisms, for life systems, okay? So let's get to that. We left off here. All right, so we talked about carbohydrates. Today we're going to talk about lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. So a lipid is something fatty, right? Everybody knows what a lipid is. These are non-polar molecules, and they won't dissolve in water. It's fats and oils, right? You can't dissolve them. When you touch them, they're going to be greasy feeling. The types of lipids that we're going to discuss are fats, phospholipids, which means it has a phosphate attached to it, and then sterols. These are hormones. Okay, lipids, as you know, are hydrophobic. They're scared of water. They're not going to mix with water. So a lot of organisms will use them to create waterproof barriers. So here we have an otter, and they have a lot of oil glands in their skin, and they move it through their fur when they're grooming, and it means that the water doesn't go all the way to their skin. It forms like a wetsuit basically for them, or actually a dry suit, so that they can stay warm. They can trap some air bubbles in their fur and they can stay warm and they don't have icy cold water right up against their skin. You may have seen birds, right? They can come out of the water and their feathers look dry. This is because when they're preening, they're moving oil through their feathers. Lipids are essential for cells. They're actually, as we're going to talk about there later, it's actually what your cell membranes are made of, lipids. So a lipid is a chain of carbon and hydrogen with some oxygen as well. Okay, so it's very similar to the formulas for carbohydrates. They're just made differently, right? Things are put in different orders, and it makes it a lipid instead of a carbohydrate. And you may have heard the term saturated fat and unsaturated fat, how much saturated you should have in your diet, and it's less healthy and all of that. The difference between a saturated fat and an unsaturated fat is how many hydrogens it has. So if it's saturated, that means it has as much hydrogen as you could fit in there. And so here we've got a saturated fat, and if you look, it's kind of like a straight line. An unsaturated fat, instead of having maximum number of hydrogens, and I'll zoom in a minute to show you, it has some double bonds, you can see here, and it ends up giving it a little kink in it. So it could have had an extra hydrogen there and it doesn't. So it's unsaturated. It's saturated means filled, right? And it's not as filled as it could be with hydrogen. So here we have a picture of a saturated fat close up and an unsaturated fat. The saturated fat is a nice long line, and the unsaturated has this kink in it. The unsaturated fats are the ones that are usually liquids at room temperature. So these will be your oils, whereas saturated fats, because they're in this nice line, they can pack together, and they can be a solid at room temperature. So that would be like butter or like lard or coconut oil, right? It is solid at room temperature. So these are just basic lipids. basic fats here. Another category of lipids that we're going to talk about are sterols. So these aren't things that you would eat, but these are hormones. And some of them even have sterol in its name, like cholesterol, right? Your body actually makes a lot of cholesterol, in addition to the fact that if you eat animal products like butter or milk or meat, you're eating some cholesterol. Your body makes cholesterol, but it's a fat, it's a lipid, right? And that's why you hear that, you know, if you eat more fats, you may have a higher cholesterol. These are used for growth and development. They do have a purpose. You need the high, the HDL, right? You need some cholesterol in your body. And there are steroid hormones like estrogen and testosterone are also steroids. These are lipid-based hormones. And then our third class of lipids that we're going to talk about are phospholipids. This means that it's the basic lipid formula, right? A lot of carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens, and there's a phosphate added on. And I know this may not be that clear, but that right there in the middle, that is a phosphate, a P. So it has a really similar structure to, you know, the other fats we were talking about, but it has this head that is a phosphate. And then it has these fatty chains, these fatty acids branching off of it. So it's often just drawn like this. So these would be the fatty chains, are what these look like, two little legs, and this head is a phosphate. And fat would resemble that, but it has just one. I mean, sorry, wax would resemble that, but just has one chain. We're going to talk a lot this semester about phospholipids, though, because as I said, cell membranes are phospholipids. So they actually, it's a double layer. So all of your cells have phospholipids, kind of like that, all the way around. So that's what our cell membranes are made of. So that is the distinction between the outside of the cell and the inside of the cell, is this membrane that's made of phospholipids. Okay, the next type of molecule that we're going to talk about is a protein. Everyone's heard of proteins, right? And when you're thinking of proteins, you probably automatically think of food. But proteins are not just foods. They are incredibly important and diverse molecules. So protein can be structural. Your hair is a protein. Your fingernails are a protein that's extruded from your cells. Bird feathers are proteins. Blood clots, all of that material that is formed, are proteins that are forming that clot. Hemoglobin is a protein that absorbs oxygen to transport oxygen throughout your body. And your muscles are proteins. So protein is a really, really diverse term. It's a term that encompasses a lot of things. So what is a protein? Well, when we're talking about proteins, this is when it gets a little more, it's a little more complex of a molecule than water or carbohydrates or lipids. It's got more in it than just carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, or even a little phosphate group like a phospholipid. A protein is formed by a bunch of little molecules put together, and those little molecules are amino acids. So if we think of each of these as an amino acid, this is a complex, this circle that I'm making here is a whole complex molecule, and it's bonded to another complex molecule, okay? So we get this whole string of these. These individual things are amino acids, and all put together, this is a protein. There are 20 different amino acids, and the order you put them in makes different proteins. Just like if each amino acid was a letter in the alphabet, you can string them together in different ways to make different words, right? So we've got 26 letters in our alphabet. There are 20 amino acids in the protein alphabet, and they get strung together in different ways. And so they form this long chain that is a protein. Our bodies can make some of these amino acids, right? There are 20 of them. Our bodies can make some, but they can't make all of them. So these are just showing you what some of these amino acids may look like. So how are these amino acids bonded together? Well, we've talked already about some kinds of bonds, but there is a fourth bond that we haven't talked about. Proteins are formed by bonding those amino acids together, and that bond is called a peptide bond. So P is for protein, is for peptide. It's a form of a covalent bond, but when it's bonding amino acids, it's called a peptide bond instead. You don't call it a covalent bond, you call it a peptide bond, okay? And there are other bonds that start to play important roles in amino acids and proteins as well. So let's look at proteins. Here we've got this basic structure of the protein on the top, right? These little circles, it looks like a beaded necklace. These are amino acids, and they are held together by peptide bonds, right? And this is the primary structure. This is the order of the amino acids, right? You go amino acid number 1, then number 5, then number 7, the number 1 again, the number 20, right? There are 20 different amino acids. What order are we putting them in? If you did them in a different order, it would be a different protein, okay? So that's the primary structure. Our secondary structure is that these amino acids bond to each other, right? Not just in this chain, but as it curves, they start hydrogen bonding to each other, okay? This folds it into a pattern, and this is its secondary structure. Then it gets all twisted up from there into a tertiary structure. And then if it may bond to another protein as well, and that would be a quaternary structure. So they can get kind of complicated. But that structure, that shape of the protein is incredibly important. If you change the protein's shape, you change whether it can do its job or not. So, you know, for your hair, okay, it doesn't matter if your hair doesn't curl in the exact same way or the right way, if it's straight instead of curly, doesn't matter, right? But some proteins do really important jobs for our bodies, right? Like hemoglobin carrying oxygen around. If that can't fold in the right way, it can't carry oxygen. Some proteins are enzymes, which means they help other reactions in our cells take place. If they're the wrong shape, they can't do that job. So this folding is really, really important. Now, the shape of that protein can change if it's affected by heat or chemicals. Something can hurt it to change its shape. This is called denaturing a protein. If we think of the shape of the protein as its nature, you can denature it. So any extreme environment can do this to a protein. So if you think about an egg white, that egg white is a protein. You can fry it, right? You can expose it to high heat, and then it turns, you know, white. It turns opaque and gets, instead of being like viscous, it turns hard, right? You can beat it, so you can physically change that by putting a lot of energy into it, right? And beaten egg whites get fluffy. You could add chemicals to it, like you could do your hair, right? You could straighten it. Once you add any of these things, you can't undenature it, right? You can't unfry an egg. You can't unbeat your egg whites. And even if your chemical hair straightener doesn't last forever, your hair is never going to go back to the exact same way it was before. So once a protein is denatured, it cannot be renatured. So as we said, there are some proteins that need to do really important jobs, and these are enzymes. These help speed up chemical reactions in your body, but they themselves aren't changed in that reaction. They're just there to, you know, spur everyone else along and be like, you know, get your job done, but they're not actually changed in that process. They have, because of their tertiary structure, right, the way they're all folded up, they have active sites that other molecules can sit in. And I'll show you a picture in a minute. And having that active site will help move that reaction along. And so it needs less energy in the system, right? So you don't have to eat quite as much sugar to get the job done as you would if you didn't have any enzymes. Or sometimes it couldn't get done at all without the enzyme. So here we have a picture of an enzyme. The gray here is the enzyme, which is really just a protein that's all folded up in a way that it left this site here, right? This is its active site. There's this molecule that fits in it. Let's say this is lactose, okay? Some people can drink lots of milk products, they feel great. Other people are lactose intolerant. What does that mean? That means they don't have the enzyme that breaks apart lactose, okay? Lactose, it is a complex molecule and it needs to get broken apart by your body. So if you have this enzyme in your body, that means the lactose sits in it. Your body can break it apart into these two products at the end, right? So you end up with these two products. The enzyme itself looks the exact same. It's ready to now take another piece of lactose and break it apart. If you're unable to digest lactose and you're lactose intolerant, that means that you either don't have enough of this enzyme or your body doesn't make this enzyme. So that's why you can take, I know there are some pills you can take that's really just giving you this enzyme so that your body could break apart the lactose that you're about to eat. So your body obviously needs proteins, and it needs amino acids. So we eat protein actually in order to get some of those amino acids so that we can make the proteins that we need. So the protein that you eat in your diet is not directly the protein that your cells are using, right? This enzyme that we were looking at, right, in the last thing that had that active site, you're not eating that, but your body needs to make that. And how does it make it? You eat an egg, your body breaks apart this chain of amino acids that was in the egg. And then you can take these and you can reorder them into, right, so if I color these, I don't have 26 colors here, but let's say this is our chain of amino acids, and each color here is a different amino acid. Remember, there are 20 amino acids, so each of these is a different one. So you eat this, and then your body could create one that starts with green and then puts two blues in a row, and then the purple, the yellow, right? So you get the picture. You can make a different one, right? You just break it apart. It's giving you all the pieces. You could get a big Lego thing, and you could tear it apart and make something totally different with those Legos, right? It's the same thing with proteins. So our body can make some of its own amino acids. It can just create it out of the molecules. But there are some that we cannot make. So those we have to eat. We have to eat those amino acids so that let's say we can't make the green ones, right? We have to eat things that have that green amino acid in order for our bodies to make this enzyme. We need to eat the green amino acid, okay? The ones that we can't make are called essential amino acids. These have to be ingested from our diet. So if you ever are looking at the nutrient content of a food, if it says a complete source of proteins, that means it has all of the essential amino acids that you need. It doesn't have every amino acid, but it has the 9, I think there are 9 essential. 9 essential. Essential are the ones that you have to eat because your body can't make it. If it is a thing that is a complete protein, has all 9 of those. So examples of that would be milk, eggs, meat, tofu. Those are usually have all 9 essential amino acids. There are a lot of dishes that only have some of them, but if you eat them together, you'll get all your essential amino acids. So like rice and beans is a classic combination. Rice doesn't have all your essential amino acids, beans don't, but put together they do. Peanut butter and whole wheat bread together have all of those essential amino acids. So you can, if you're careful with your diet, you can get all of your essential amino acids without eating any meat products. Okay, and the final type of macromolecule that we're going to talk about today are nucleic acids. And everybody's heard of these, I am sure. This is DNA and RNA. We're going to talk more in depth about them, I think, in chapter 8, but just to give you a little idea of their like the molecular structure. These actually direct the production of protein. So you know, your body can put together these strands of amino acids. Well, how does your body know what order to put them in? Right? Is it just like randomly picking amino acids out of the like whatever's floating by? No, it knows, okay, first I want the orange one, then I'm going to need a red one, and then I need a blue one, right? The nucleic acids are actually telling them the order to put things in. Everybody's heard of DNA, and I think after this year, everyone's heard of RNA, because that's what some of the vaccines are made of, right? The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are messenger RNA, which are what tells your cells what order, how to make those proteins, right? And those mRNA vaccines tell them, make a spike protein on COVID, and then your body recognizes it. So I think this year, as tragic and difficult as it has been, has given people a real understanding of what RNA does. Because now we know you get an injection of messenger RNA, your body makes a spike protein. DNA and RNA are made up of nucleotide bases. They're the little units. So just like a protein is made up of a bunch of amino acids strung together, DNA and RNA are made up of a bunch of bases put together. The difference is there aren't nearly as many nucleotide bases. There are only 4 bases, and there's 20 amino acids. But you can still, you know, put those 4 bases together in lots of different orders. So here we have a picture of a nucleotide. Here we're looking at DNA. It's a double-stranded helix, right? You have this base and a sugar and a phosphate. This backbone here is made up of a sugar and a phosphate. And then these kind of rungs that go into the middle, that is your nitrogenous base. It means it has a nitrogen in it, right? Or multiple nitrogens. Got lots of nitrogen. So in DNA, they each have 4, DNA and RNA each have 4 bases. There's one difference in their base. So these are our DNA bases, A, T, G, and C. And you've probably heard of them before. A stands for adenine, T is thymine, G is guanine, C is cytosine. I'm not going to ask you what they stand for. We're just going to use A, T, G, and C. Okay? And the way the DNA is made up of is it has this this backbone of sugar and phosphate, right? And then it has these rungs. It always has pairs, right? So it's always 2 rungs going into the middle. This looks kind of like a ladder, right? And they always pair up with the same ones. So if one is an A, the other is a T. If one is a G, the other is a C. So if you look at this sequence, if we pull them apart and you know that half of this DNA strand is AAA, GTC, GGCC, you can look at that and know what the other half is. So I'll give you a minute, figure out what the other half of this strand is, and then I'll put it up. So pause your video for a sec and then start it up again in a minute. Okay, so you've paused, you're back. So let's figure out these pairs. A is paired with T, so it's going to be TTT. G is paired with C. T is paired with A. C is paired with G. G is paired with C. And C is paired with G. So I can give you any strand of DNA and you can tell me what the other strand looks like. Okay, and that is the end of chapter 2. So go in, answer to the discussion question, and then come back in a bit and we will begin on chapter 3.